Och då, sen sätter vi oss tillsammans. Så jag tror du står med mig uppe här. Ja, jag tycker det. Det är trevligt. Ja, det kan du göra. Exakt.
Det är hur kort som helst.
Det är samma här. Nej, det är... Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. We are past 12 o'clock, so we say good afternoon. It's very nice to see so many of you here. We heard that there were some challenges in the subway, so some people may be stuck somewhere in Stockholm, so it's great, really, that so many are still here. My name is Johan Kylenstierna. I'm the Executive Director of the Stockholm Environment Institute, one of the 3 organizations today organizing this seminar. The seminar will really focus very much on Commissioner Potočnik. So I will only say the sort of 30-second introduction about the Stockholm Environment Institute. We are an independent research foundation established about 25 years ago by the Swedish government. And we are today 180 researchers in 6 countries. We have 9 offices. A very international organization focusing on environment, development issues, science for policy. So a very mixed and diverse group of staff members based here with the headquarters in Stockholm, very close by here at Garnisonen, about 70 people. So that's the 30-second introduction. I really would like to welcome all of you here, but in particular a certain group, because I checked the table of contents, so I hope, or the table list of people, I hope you are here now. All should feel equally welcome, of course, but I know there's a group of students from Östermalms. Yes, as always, students are sitting in the back. It's very nice to have you here. Why I want to highlight this is because they are from a high school nearby here. We quite often talk about all the challenges we have 2050. It's an easy way for us in, well, slightly older generation now, you know, to say that, well, 2050 will be all these challenges. These guys up there, they are the one going to work in the middle of those challenges 2050, and I think we should never forget that. So we have to talk about challenges and opportunities. A warm welcome to you. I'm very pleased to introduce Astrid Söderberg-Widding, Vice Chancellor of Stockholm University, also one of the organizations organizing this today. So, Astrid.
Thank you. Welcome all to this lunch seminar, and of course a particularly warm welcome to Commissioner Potočnik. We are very honored and very pleased to be able to host you here today, and we are also very pleased on behalf of Stockholm University, I can say that we are very pleased to co-arrange this with the European Commission and Stockholm Environment Institute, with which we, since a couple of weeks, have a strategic partnership established. We are all, I think, looking forward to the talk of Commissioner Potočnik about the need to change European Union economies. A question central to us as researchers in Stockholm University. We have a very strong environmental research spanning from social sciences to science, but it is also a question central to our common future in the Union. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Commissioner Potočnik.
Thank you very much. So, Commissioner Janez Potočnik, if you can join me here on stage, and give an applaud when he's coming up here. So, European Commissioner for the Environment, indeed a very interesting position to have in the EU. And one thing that we appreciate very much, and when we were contacted by the EU office here in Stockholm, was the fact that when you visit different countries, you always try to make time to also have a more open public presentation and discussion. And we have quite a lot of time. We know that you will speak for around half an hour or so, which gives us half an hour plus, or even around 40 minutes for questions and having a discussion. So please, start to think about questions you may have for the Commissioner after his presentation, and we will move forward directly to that. I won't introduce you a lot because I really would like you, to have as much time as possible. So if you want to say a few words about yourself, please feel free to do so. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody, also to the ones in the last rows, of course. This time, as you can see, the European Commission is in good company. And I'm really pleased that I have the possibility to share those 2 hours or an hour and a half with you. Maybe you will anyway notice from what is my education and so on from my presentation, so I will not go into that. I would rather start by saying that what is pretty commonly happening to me as the European Commissioner for Environment, whenever I enter to any kind of room, they are looking to me a bit like as Shrek or Incredible Hulk. In both cases, a green monster. So they assume that, of course, I will fiercely defend environmental interests, but today you will hear talking me at least as much about economy as also about environment, because I firmly believe that the real answers to the challenges which we are facing in environmental area go to the very roots of the economic behavior. So I would like to speak to you today more as a father, concerned citizen, an economist, Slovenian, but yes, I happen to be also the Commissioner for Environment. Anyway, I would like that you would leave this room with one simple message to which the whole lecture will be about. We need to change. It's that message which I would like to take with you home. We need to change the way we produce, the change we consume, actually to change the way we live. And there are two kinds of arguments which I would like to develop, that you would understand why this change is simply unavoidable. One side of the arguments, it's the environmental arguments. Another side of the arguments are economic arguments. Environmental arguments are more difficult to sell nowadays in Europe, while economic arguments, they are easier. And that's why it is absolutely necessary using them both if you want to be successful in policy making. But let me start with environmental arguments which are solid enough that they should convince everybody. I have read in Nature, in the scientific journal, a bit more than a year ago, a quotation which goes approximately like that: human population growth and per capita consumption rate underlie all of the other present drivers for the global change. So population growth and per capita consumption rate. Let me try to explain you a bit more in detail what is happening in the world. About the population growth, you all know that we are currently 7 billion on the planet. You have probably all heard that we will be 9 billion in 2045 approximately. But let me translate that 9 billion, the figure which we have all got used to something which becomes a bit more ringing the bell. That means that in one generation, we will have on the planet additionally more people than it was the total amount of population at the beginning of 20th century. Because the total amount of population at the beginning of 20th century was 1.5 billion. That means daily more than 200,000 people. It means Germany approximately in 1 year, Sweden in 45 days, or if you want 6 weeks and 4 days, and Slovenia in 9 days and 6 hours. You have to introduce hours when it comes to Slovenia. So that's what's happening. And the other trend which we are also facing is the trend which, for example, McKinsey is estimating that we will have 3 billion additional consumers which are today living in poverty in the middle class consumption till 2030. This is part of the quotation which talks about per capita consumption rate. So these are all the citizens which are today living in the countries which are big countries with a big amount of population and where they have relatively a lot of poverty still present. So these two trends are there. And what is basically the problem which is connected with that? It's the fact that we are living in the world of limited resources. Talk it about fresh water, oceans, land and soil, clean air, raw materials, biodiversity, ecosystems, fuel, whatever you wish. And the fact that the estimates are showing us that if we will continue taking into account those trends, we will by 2050 need approximately 3 times more resources that we are currently using, that we will need approximately 70% more of feed, food and fiber till 2050, that till 2030 we will need approximately 40% more drinking water, fresh water than we can access. And all that in the context of the fact that today 60% of ecosystems are already degraded and used unsustainably. Already today. So it's the conclusion that we have to change the way how we produce, consume and live. It's pretty simple, and especially one can connect it with the developed part of the world. And that has nothing to do, by the way, with soft economic laws, but it has a lot to do with the clear physical requirements of the very limits of the planet on which we are living. But okay, I have mentioned at the beginning that the arguments which I have developed now, and I think are more than convincing, are not always the ones which make the change and would make somebody really doing things in a different way. But if somebody really doesn't believe in that, then let's try to look at the economic arguments, and I will give you 4 good reasons why you would come to the same conclusion. Especially, this is of course valid for the Europe and European Union. In Europe, we live on the continent which is very densely populated. We live on the continent which is locked into resource inefficient production and consumption. Industrial revolution started here. We are currently using 15 tons per capita in a year per citizen of various materials. 5 tons of that becomes waste, and half of that waste, almost 3 tons, becomes its landfill, so lost forever. That's the first reason. The second reason is that we are seeing a total shift of resource prices. While in the 20th century, the composite resource price index was falling with the exception of 2 world wars and oil crisis. At the beginning of this century, starting from 1998, we call it a hockey stick. The increase of the resource prices, 300%. 85% of European companies are expecting that the resource prices in their companies in the next 5 years for their companies will increase. In the past, people were more focusing on labor productivity, logically because labor cost was increasing very fast. Now labor cost, it's more or less, at least in the developed world, stable, but the resource prices are increasing. So the shift from labor to resource productivity, it's only logical. The third reason is that if we, for example, take the data from the biggest European economy, the Germany, and there are data which are valid for industry, 45% of the cost in German industry can be connected with resources, 18% with labor. So still today we are very much focusing on labor productivity, and we don't talk about the total factor productivity yet in our economic analysis and conclusions. But it is wrong, because you will come to the wrong conclusion. And fourth reason is that Europe as a continent is extremely import dependent. We import practically more than 60% of energy, and estimates are that we might overshoot 80% till 2030. If you go to the periodic system, I can tell you what we are importing, and their dependency is also increasing. We import 48% of copper, or 64% of zinc and bauxite, 78% of nickel, 100% of cobalt, platinum, titanium, vanadium, all rare earth metals. Half of everything what is inbuilt in our products, it's imported. So if you connect these 4 facts together, coming to the conclusion that producing the products using less water, using less raw materials, using less energy, reusing them, recycling them, makes full economic sense. it is the real way to keep industry in Europe. If we are sincere in that we want to keep it in Europe, which I'm hearing constantly as one of the problems which we environmentalists are causing to the industry. It is just the opposite. If we are sincere to keeping it in Europe, then this is their potential competitiveness gain. And it's unavoidable. So the conclusion which you can draw again from that, what I have said, it's yes, we have to change. We have to change the way we produce, the way we consume, and the way we live. So till now I have sounded a bit more like 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, but let me use the quotes from 2 American presidents, the last 2. Yes, we can, and it is the economy stupid. I would add, it is not only the economy stupid. Because those 2 quotes, I think, are very important to be taken into account if you want to talk about the answer, how we can and how we should address the questions we are dealing with today. Do we have answers to that? Yes, I think we have them. But let me start by some basic facts of life, how today we are organized in economic sense. We have inefficiencies still all around us. Turning coal into light is still only 3% efficient. Only 15% of the energy we put in our petrol tank is used to move our car down the road. 80% of what we produce, it's used once and then discarded. Only 1% of the valuable rare earth that we use in products are recycled at the end of the product life. And the final, most critical inefficiency or imbalance is that 80% of the resources are basically globally used by 20% of population. So if you just take one product, I'm pretty much sure that each of you have it in your pocket, mobile phone. You can produce a wedding ring by digging 10 tons of golden ore, of gold ore. Or you can produce, using, of course, the cyanide, which is one of the major poisons. But you can also produce it by recycling 10 kilos of mobile phones. 10 kilos only, the same quantity. Yet we are currently recycling in the European Union less than 10% of all mobile phones. And more than 100 million of those yearly are at the bottom of the drawers. More than 100 million. And if you would just recycle them in Europe, yearly you would get back 2.4 tons of gold, 25 tons of silver, 1 ton of palladium, and 900 tons of copper. I could continue, because if you would go next step, not to that they would not become the waste in the first place, but that you would refurbish them to a state as good as new. Ellen MacArthur Foundation is estimating that you could generate 210,000 euros net material cost saving for each million euros of mobile phones. So that's all there. And of course, when we talk about as consumers, there is the idea of a consumer, it's not to own the thing, but to use the thing. That's why I think it's so important that we understand that some changes are relatively easy and could be also implemented. One central question is the role of the market. Many believe that the market itself would be the best positioned, that it would deliver all the necessary answers. I certainly believe that markets are here to stay for quite some time, because we don't have better redistribution mechanism than the markets. But there are some facts of life which we have to take into account. Markets cannot ensure efficiency in the allocation and use of resources if prices do not reflect the true value and costs of resources, which is today the case. if rewards to capital are disproportionate to rewards to other inputs, which is today the case, if managers on annual contracts are induced to make short-term investment decisions overly influenced by bonuses based on short-term share price, which is today the case. So we absolutely need something like market regulation. And that's a always existing famous dilemma: does the regulation goes together with the market philosophy? My answer to you would be via, since we talk about the global markets and global game, would be about global game. The global game today, you know, it's football. Ask the best football players, do they want to have good referee, and do they want to have clear rules of the game? And their answer would be, of course, yes, because without good referee and without clear rules of the game, you would have chaos on the place. And the one who would prevail on that marketplace of football field will be the most aggressive players. And that's not more football we want to enjoy. And basically that's exactly the market economy which we don't want to enjoy anymore. I think innovation can give you a lot of answers because human imagination is without limits. But if you want to unlock the real potential of innovation, it is absolutely necessary that there are right incentives coming and right messages, right targets coming from the policymakers. Otherwise, the innovation is following the target which is not exactly the right target. And I think that that's one of the parts on which we still have a lot of reserve. Products, it would be utmost important that design of the products, it's improved in a way that you think when you produce a product that that product could, at the end of life cycle, could be entirely recycled or reused. So the design of the product, it's already the beginning or the end of the story of the product. Consumers, we are extremely important part of the decision making because we can easily see from all the studies that we are concerned about what is happening in our environment. But on the other hand, I can give you the data that today globally we have 400 environmental eco-labels. 400. 48% of consumers are saying that they do not trust anymore the labels. So if we want to be informed consumers, then we need space in which we understand and situation in which we can quickly judge on the basis as being not abused, but consumers who use the proper information. Finally, also about business models, the thing which I briefly mentioned before. So we are not guided by owing something, but by using something. So leasing, sharing, will have to become more our reality that it's today. And many times when we talk about the future changes of the economy, people immediately switch to the eco-industries and to the potential of eco-industries, which is enormous because this is, by the way, one of the rare sectors which was growing during the crisis, seriously growing. But the trick, it's not in eco-industries, they are enablers. The trick is in changing all economic activities and behavior. So resource efficiency and circular economy will be two words which you will be probably hearing more. With resource efficiency, according to some of the estimates which I mentioned already before, you could meet the approximately 30% of the needs till 2030 of increased use of the resources. So it is important, but it's absolutely not the final decision or solution. That's why circular economy is so crucial and so important. To slowly conclude, we live in the 21st century, which is determined by fragility. We are more interconnected than ever. we are more interdependent than ever. Our personal responsibility and collective responsibility is much bigger for our own common future than it was in the past. And it is utmost important that we turn this fragile century from this fragility to sustainability. In the environment policy making, what I have learned in those 4 years and a half since I'm responsible for this portfolio, in the past, I'm a bit simplifying, but it's not far from the truth. In the past, the policies were done in a way that each of the sectors, each of the stakeholders was following their own interest. And when those very same persons who were in the morning working in a factory came home and take off the jacket, they recognize that the water which is coming out of the pipe, it's not clean anymore, and the air which they are breathing, it's not clean enough. And that public, they became a kind of public person. And that kind of public concern started to create then legislation, new limits, new targets when it comes to the water quality, when it comes to the air quality. Of course, the damage has already been done because many investments in the business sector were also done and in good faith because nobody was telling them something is wrong and the direction was simply wrong. That's why it's so important to understand that only through the integration of policies, integration of environmental concerns in agriculture, fisheries, industry, energy, name it, whatever you wish, trade policy, research policy, you can truly achieve what you want. It's a bit like preventing the disease or curing the disease. There are two major reasons why it's better to prevent the disease than to cure it. For the people who want to hear economic arguments, yeah, because it's much cheaper. But for the common sense people, because you are not ill. And that's why it's important that you basically go into the prevention story. One of the problems which I am seeing as the major dilemmas which we will have to address is this long-term, short-term policy making. I'm hearing that arguments, okay, we are in economic crisis, and because we are in economic crisis, we have to focus on short-term issues, and those long-term issues could be left to for somebody else, and for later times. We know that they are important, but not now. All this is an illusion. All the things which I'm talking here about, it's here and now. And if we don't address it also simultaneously via addressing the economic crisis, we are fiercely running into another kind of crisis. And it would be, with all the honesty, I think also that our systems, our democracies are unfortunately organized in a way that we are not at all contributing a lot, that this longer term thinking would become more the essence of our policy making. How many politicians you know they were re-elected and we are the one who are electing them because they are thinking long term? How many entrepreneurs are actually rewarded on the basis of their 5 years economic results and not yearly or even quarterly income sheets? So that's where I think we are failing. The problem is that all the challenges of the 21st century can simply not be addressed without taking long-term vision and long-term questions into consideration seriously. So for the people who are saying, and that's an argument which also I'm hearing quite commonly, that the environment protection is an obstacle to economic growth, my answer is it is just the opposite. It is just the opposite. Ignoring those things is the best way how you will limit the growth. And if you don't understand that now, continue. But those times when you will understand are from day to day closer. I think when we talk about circular economy, the best example from which we can learn is, of course, the example of nature. Nature is a circular economy. Millions of years of adaptation where nothing is lost and everything has a purpose. And we are part of the nature. And I think it's high time that we start to behave like that. People are saying that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years from now, in the past, of course. But we have missed that point. The second best, it's now. Because we certainly would not like that in 20 years' time somebody would stand in front of you and ask you the same question. So, yes, I think it's of fundamental importance if we want to change the way we produce, we consume, we live, that we go, that we understand that environment and economy are two sides of the same coin, and that we have to go in the very roots of the economic theory and economic behavior if we want to provide the proper answers to the challenges which are lying ahead of us. We are supposed to be intelligent human beings, but we still have to prove that we are intelligent. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Commissioner. That was really great. And I personally believe that we need at least an incredible Hulk in Brussels, having that vision. And sometimes when you get angry, I think, a little bit more extra strength wouldn't hurt.
I wouldn't hurt at all, yes.
No, I'm sure about that. We're going to have a question and answer session. So who will help me with the microphone? The reason we need a microphone in particular is the fact that this is webcasted live as well. So don't speak before you're having a microphone. While you are thinking about some questions, just very quickly, if I can follow up on your final, unfortunately you have to stay with this microphone here, but
it's okay.
As you said, long term is difficult to really get into the political system, and partly we as voters are of course responsible for this. What can we do then? I mean, this continues to be a challenge in a democracy, you could say.
Yeah, I think that the real answer is sitting in the last rows. So they are mastering the social media, and they can master also the power which us politicians and business sector will not be able to ignore.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, I take a couple of sort of direct follow-up questions on your presentation. You mentioned the fact that it's essential to really integrate environmental issues in the broader policies of the EU and at country level.
Don't ask me if that's easy.
Is that easy? No. I will be even more provocative in this sense. How do you do that? I mean, what is it? What are the sort of opening points when you talk to your fellow commissioners in the different DGs to make them actually take this seriously and see the same perspective as you do?
First, you have to step in their shoes and try to understand why, for some things, they would have the problem. Sometimes those problems are not connected with them, but connected with the whole system which stands behind. And trying to develop argumentation which is easily understandable, and that's the trick through which you can get the support. I think that at the end of the day, for example, if I take a simple example of a fisherman and some passionate environmentalist, short term, they would have totally different interest. That is, the first one would like to catch all the fish because that is basically maximizing the profit. The second one would like to stop all the fishing because that's we already have overfished fish, and that's the way how we should approach. In essence, they both agree. They agree that sustainable fishing is the way ahead because we have fished forever, and on the other hand, we would like also the fishermen would like that his next generations would still be in the position of comfortably living out of that activity. And I think that's the kind of a logic which we need to start to present, so that there are common interests, that there are common ways how we can understand and overcome some of the divisions which are at the first line existing. And I can say that during these 5 years I have really talked a lot and worked a lot, and also my colleagues from the DG with the colleagues from other areas, which are of course also having their legitimate interests and concerns, to whom you have to listen to and try to find the best answer. Not that you would always find the way ahead which would entirely fit the needs and also fit your ambition, but it's closer to that than if you sometimes go to an open fight and you create a kind of opposition which does not help, and at the end then you have, you know that among us humans many times the things don't move from bare stupid personal relations, and that are the things which you have to put behind. You simply have to create these relations as good as possible, because on the personal understanding and also on the fact that at the end you work for the same purpose and with the same ideas in mind, then you can move ahead.
So it's almost as part of the whole European Union vision in a way. I mean,
Sure.
we have a common interest there. I'm sure there are going to be questions about, the common agricultural politics and policy and so on related to environmental issues. But if I can just select one other area that has been very much in the media here, is the goals, targets that we are setting in the EU on climate, the 40%. Reducing emissions, the 28% on renewable energy, and still waiting for a target on energy efficiency. It's easy to be very critical, and many are. On the other hand, the EU is also part of a much broader context in the world, with falling energy prices in the US, etc. How much do you think the EU should be and can be a driver of international environmental policy, and proactive also, for instance, to make sure that we have a positive agreement in Paris next year?
We can be, we should be, and we have no other choice. How much and the level of ambition, it's the only one which for me it's debatable. But I sincerely hope that in 2015 there will be a bit more of the things which we are currently seeing in practice, from the statements coming from the United States or from China about more openness about those issues, that this will be capitalized in some decisions which will be done during that year. Of course, personally, I would not be against targets which would be more ambitious, but as you said, at the end of the day, it's not one, it's the whole bunch of interests which come into consideration when you are discussing and deciding on those years. Even with the things which we proposed, we are firmly staying in the leadership, because it is more than obvious that we are still the only ones who have the legally binding targets, and that we insist on that policy and in the direction of that policy. What I was a bit missing during the discussion, I was constantly trying to convey those arguments back into this discussion when we were doing that internally, was the fact that we have a bit too much discussed of exactly what was your immediate reaction was, how much the others, and what are the costs, and that. So what a bit too much disappeared from the table is why the hell we are doing that. And that we have recognized that we have to stay inside the 2 degrees Celsius, otherwise we will have major disaster. And for me, the core question was either these targets are keeping us inside that framework, because if they are not keeping us, if we don't have a scientific proof that this is enough, and we know clearly that till 2050 we are aspiring to something between 80–95% reduction of CO2, are we well on target on those things? These are, for me, the vital questions which are there, and this would, for me, be the primary leading questions. Then engaging with the international society, trying to be more persuasive than in the past. Yes, of course, that's difficult part of the story, but I think that the facts are also working. Facts are coming and are stronger and stronger on our side. and that you can see big countries like China understanding some environmental challenges much differently than in the past. For example, okay, air quality, it's not directly connected to climate, but in many cases you have the same result. But you are seeing today that nobody can neglect anymore the real problems, which none of the political leadership there can ignore that problem, because people are rising and they are openly asking the question. We have, for example, studies which are showing that in the northern part of China, the life expectancy is 5.5 years than in the southern. 5.5 years. Who is ready to invest as much of his or her life for better economic development and I don't know what? So I think these are the things which are changing. And these are the things which we have to spread, where we have to show that we understand what is the essence of the challenge which we are trying to face. Because if we will lose that major reason that we started with energy and climate policy, dealing with them together in the same package, if we lose that reason, then we have lost the direction which is essential if we want to have problems addressed properly.
And just a final, then, I think that is extraordinary. And as you say, keeping the sort of long-term vision there at the same time and not get lost only in technicalities. I agree, it's really, really important. But understanding also, if we go back to almost the first question, getting the political momentum and having the support of the populations and so on. A recent Gallup in the US pointed out the fact that now 53% of the American population are quite hesitant to climate change. Not that they don't recognize it, but they see it, as you say, as a more long-term issue compared to short-term challenges. Have you seen a difference in how, when you are traveling around Europe, how people in general are looking at environmental issues, considering the fact that we've had also this economic challenges, unemployment, etc.? Or is there a strong commitment, you would argue? I know this is a general question, for strong environmental policies broadly in Europe?
The easiest way, to seeing a difference is to measure it. So to do a kind of public opinion poll and see it. So that would be my way of approach to judging either there are differences or not. In essence, of course, if you do that kind of measurements, you would always come to the conclusions that there are differences. But at the same time, you would also come to the conclusion that the concern about environment, about climate change in all Europe, it's present and it's convincing. And that should be convincing enough too also for the policymakers. And that are facts which we have to take into account. Of course, that in the context, when we discuss those issues in the context of growth and jobs and dealing with the future developments, I sincerely hope that people understand when we say green growth, that we are basically saying, taking into account those things which I mentioned, you still have enormous opportunities of innovation to deliver new ways new ways to fulfill the expectations, to fulfill the demands of the consumers in a new way, which is again still job. You are not losing the job because of that. But I personally believe that when we talk about future growth, and we many times say that green growth it's an important part of the future growth. No, green growth is the future growth. There is no other growth, full stop. I think we should start to understand that. And via that, I don't really want to open the question how much growth we can expect in Europe, because I can tell you the figures and you can judge from the figures yourself. In the 1960s, the average growth rate in Europe was 5.3. In 1970s, it was 3.8. In 1980s, it was 3.1. In 1990s, it was 2.3. In the last decade of the previous century, it was 1.4. So now you can guess. If somebody thinks that this happened because of environmental legislation, welcome. So I think it's really important to understand that in this globalized world where the knowledge is flying like that, where investments are flying like that, where people are living, comparing to us in, of course, position which is totally unacceptable, that it's more than normal that they are growing faster than we are growing, and that we should be happy if we stay with something and if we fulfill, if we have the quality of life which we have developed, and maybe answer some of the questions of redistribution, how to address the poverty which is existing in our societies and so on. And that are the questions which we will have to start sincerely asking. But currently we know where we are, and I think that it's absolutely important that we try to convince everybody that also with the answers which we are providing through the protection of environment, we are basically creating also development opportunities.
Thank you very much. And I can really interpret from your last point again that we do need a green, incredible Hulk in Brussels, and try to convince all other DGs about this common vision as well. Only one type of growth, green growth. Okay, so let's take a number of questions and comments,
sure.
and you can keep them.
Maybe we'll start in this section.
Yes,
here,
we start in this section.
Since we have one mic.
We have 4 here in this section. We take these 4, and we say your name also. Don't forget.
5, perhaps. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Ambassador of Slovenia.
Yeah, you have a Slovenian accent, yes.
I would like to thank Mr. Commissioner for really comprehensive explanation, and you have tackled actually the point which is in the middle, that this our economic model, which we are proud of, is actually generating the unsustainability. So the more growth which we want, we need more consumption, and consumption is for the human pleasure. So we have forgotten the modesty, which should be the virtue. Here in the north, it is modesty. So how do we actually influence this? Because the things would go down if we are, should I say, starting this. So we would have to have a kind of a broader consensus. And my question, of course, it is also, to what extent you think now the state actors, now we are still on the state actors, sovereign state actors, are solely those who are deciding on this global level to reach the consensus? Are there some other forces behind which we have to, in a way, incorporate? Thank you very much.
By the way, it's good to see some known faces.
So let's take a few more, please.
Just, I have to write it down.
And I'm happy that we could agree to use only one language, though. You know? So please.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation. My name is Daphne Tuvison. I came here today from Kalmar to demonstrate outside for the climate parliament that we're going to have in the beginning of June. Because as it's been made very clear, as you said, the science has been done, but the policies are not in place. And climate is a very serious problem that we have to face. Yes. When I listen to your analysis, I feel I can agree with everything you've said. What worries me, one of the problems of being my age, is that I feel it's a déjà vu. We've heard it all before. Limits to growth came out 40 years ago. They were saying the same things. The situation in the world today compared to then, I think, has changed considerably. We have degraded our natural resources and ecosystems to a horrible state. And we have today a concentration of power in the hands of multinational corporations and financial institutions that we did not have 40 years ago. The situation is much more difficult to deal with today. And when I hear people analyzing the problems, and nobody's talking about the power dimensions and how we deal with this, then I don't think we haven't gotten there yet. So I want to know, how is Europe going to help Poland stop using coal within the next 5 years? Because that's what we have to do.
Okay, thank you very much. The power dimensions, I think, is a very, very interesting point as well. So please, the lady there, and then we have 2 more. Can you keep 5 people?
5 will be too much.
Cool. So we take one more, and then
we
we take the 2 of you after. So 1 more.
Hi, thank you for a very inspiring speech. My name is Cecilia Brännström and I come from H&M. We're a major fashion retailer and fashion brand, and since last year we're also collecting clothing in all our stores worldwide for reuse and recycling. And my question to you is how the European Union could ease and facilitate the flow of recyclable materials, in our case textiles, to other countries, because today what we are facing is a lot of barriers in trying to close the loop on textiles and actually recycle these old textiles that are recyclable to new textile material. We can't import, for example, or export, in our case, from the European Union to our major textile spinning markets like Turkey, India, China, not in any form, not as fibers, not as old garments, not in cut pieces, because it's considered waste. So that's actually a huge problem for us to recycle these resources into new raw material.
Okay, thank you very much. Very specific. And just to raise your hands a little bit so people, so we can see how many are planning to ask a question. It's very much focused here, so it's good to see you in the back as well. Good. So these three, and then we take 2 questions more here.
I will, of course, try to answer quickly because so that we can be more into the loop. Consumer story and the first part of question, basically of how we act, how we create this consumer's power and so on. It's, of course, an important part of the answer. I think one part on which I have alluded already in the presentation was that we have to think about different kind of business models. For example, one good example would be Michelin. Instead of, they have a pilot, instead of selling the tire, that they lease a tire. What is the difference? If you sell the tire, your interest is to maximize the number of tires, and the tire should not last too long, but if you lease the tire, your interest is totally different, that they are the best and that they last as long as possible, because that's your profit. But you, as a consumer, still have the same fulfilled need. And I think these types of things, which are already existing as pilots, but the real question is how to mainstream that it would become the core of the policies. On the global, on the power of the global states comparing to the rest, I was, in a way, at least from a substance point of view, heading European delegation in Rio +20, and my conclusion after that was that if somebody was really lacking behind what is happening in the world were us politicians, the leaders, while the business sector was pretty much opened, not to mention the civil society, which was, of course, pushing further. And I think that sometimes we do not hear what actually we are a bit behind what is happening. I also believe that sometimes various industrial associations are not doing favor too much to themselves, defending some things which are in the long term undefendable. And better they would need to get the voice of the progressive part of industry, the part which is seeing and wanting different and differently in the future, that they would be more clearly coming with their messages to us. And that's basically also partially answering to your question about the division of the powers. It's, no, I can agree with you that it's probably déjà vu. Okay, but there is a minor difference. I'm a commissioner, so I have some power, and I try to do what I'm saying in practice as much as I can. The fact of life is that, for example, I'm seeing all the people coming from business sector because I have to listen to them and listen to their interests. I'm seeing also the people coming from civil society, NGOs. At the end, it's your personal credibility when you do the policies. And you can't change that. And the fact that in this power distribution, what I think it's an unfinished job inside the business sector, it's exactly that inside the business sector, the progressive part would become more vocal, than actually the defending status quo part. Because it's a bit, but unfortunately it's like a bit, I don't know, with the pupils in the school. If you are a teacher, you never deal with the ones who are doing well because you know they are doing well and they have no problems, but you deal with those who have problems. And then when this becomes part of policy making, then we all have problems. And I think that's in essence where we are sometimes doing the things wrong. Poland stopped using the coal. You know that they are in essence desperately trying themselves, and they see a lot of hope in the shale gas story and replacement. I'm barely stating the facts. In replacement of the coal with the shale gas, which, if that would be a transitional arrangement for some phase, then for me it's logical. But you know, the energy story, if I try to cut it short and present it how I understanding it, it's I was before Science and Research Commissioner, and I will never forget the fact that investments for science in the energy area in 1970s, after the oil crisis in Europe, were 5 times higher than 2005, 2006, those years where the latest data came. So we lived in a period of time where we believed that everything is under control and there no serious problem is existing, and we were really not investing in new ways of getting new energy sources, grid system, storage system. So these are basically the core problematic things which today we still have to deal with. So there was an illusion that, and when the climate change emerged, we all wanted to have immediately the answers, but we have really not invested in that we would be close to that. And now we started to regenerate the machine, but we are in a kind of a transition time in which we are step by step trying to change some of the developments, and where I hope that the logic of support of the renewables will stay with us, that policy, because also with the shale gas, my answer is always it has a potential, certain potential in transition and in replacing coal, but we should never forget it's still a fossil fuel. So full stop. And that's with the consistency of the policies which you have to keep. But it's also important to say that we have to understand that currently how we function in European Union is that energy mix is decided by the member state. So it's not European policy. So what is European policy? It's what we collectively agree. For example, CO2 reductions, 20% of renewables. That's a bit limiting the flexibility, but that's what we agree collectively. The rest, they have the full flexibility. And we see also those days which we are living, how this energy independency, security, and so on questions become again more visible and more important. So for me, going into the direction of strengthening internal market, creating internal market for energy in Europe would be a logical direction to go. And if this would happen, then of course also a bit more discussion collectively on some of those things would make sense. Finally, on the recycling story. With a package which we will present still during this mandate, we will basically strengthen the requirements from member states for recycling. So we have an agreement inside 7th Environmental Action Programme that we would implement through the target setting the waste hierarchy in practice. And waste hierarchy is basically saying the best waste is no waste, then it's reuse, recycle, then it's the question which is connected to incineration and energy recovery, and finally it's about landfilling. So we want to phase out landfilling, and we want to increase recyclability to something like 70% or something, which basically we know it's feasible. Some regions are already achieving it, some member states are close to that, but the target must be such that it's inspiring and moving the society somewhere. So we would like that the message is understood that the waste would never anymore in the future be understood as a problem, but as a valuable resource, which should be recycled and put back into the, pumped back into the production cycle. Because if we don't do that, first of all, we do economic harm to ourselves, because it makes no sense that we basically use the resources while resource prices are increasing very much. And secondly, of course, we harm our health and environment, and both are terrible consequences which we should not accept.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is what I'm going to do. We have two questions here first. I noted a few questions in the middle, but I also want to give priority to any of our students up there. If you want to answer the question as well, then I will give you a priority line in that. But please, we start with the two questions here first.
Good afternoon. My name is Jens Holm. I'm a member of the Swedish Parliament from the Left Party and used to be a member of the European Parliament, by the way. Thank you very much for a very inspiring lecture. I think you should hold this to your colleagues in the European Commission too. I would like to ask something about environmentally harmful subsidies. We know that environmentally harmful subsidies is a huge obstacle in the transition to a more environmentally friendly economy. Worldwide, we subsidize fossil fuels, highways, intensive livestock production with more than $500 billion a year. I think on the European Union level, there is more or less a consensus that we should phase out environmentally harmful subsidies. I have two questions. My first question is, which environmentally harmful subsidies would you like to phase out, short and long term? And there is a new proposal from the European Commission regarding sale promoting measures on the agricultural level. That means funding, marketing money in order to increase consumption of, for instance, alcohol, meat, chocolate, pastries, and so on. And this was commissioned from the European Commission last year, and it will be dealt with on the Agri meeting in Brussels next week. And the proposal from the Commission is to increase these subsidies threefold. And I just can't see the logic in it. Can you? Thank you.
So policy coherence again, maybe an issue there. We had one more, it's somewhere in the middle here. Where was that? Okay, yes, please.
Hi, Rini Trapp from the Danish Embassy, and I would also like to thank the Commissioner for an excellent lecture. I'm afraid this might be a little bit repetitive. The question's already been posed, sort of, but in Sweden there's a fairly high degree of recycling. For instance, if you look at household waste, it has to be segregated into different garbage cans. Do you see that this might be an initiative the EU Commission could look at for implementing in the EU, or do you have any other concrete initiatives that you're looking at? Thank you.
Recycling, you mean?
For garbage, household waste.
Household waste, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. It's okay to take one more. I think it was actually one of the students. Are you a student? Otherwise, I won't allow it. No, but anyway, it's difficult for me to see here. You all look so mature. So we have the gentleman up there.
Hello, my name is Pieter Henkens. I'm a master's student at Stockholm University. Thank you for the nice lecture. Indeed, I agree with you that the present and the future generations actually can put pressure on politicians and corporations, but we also need support from the European Union. And I think that the European Union can play a very defining role in regulating economy. So which measures is the European Union going to take to give the corporations the incentive to take that green thinking into account instead of supporting excessive consumerism and also a continuous strive for profit?
Okay, thank you. A very small question to answer, but I mean they are circulating partly around similar topics. I would argue. So, please, if you can provide a consolidated answer to this, that would be excellent. After that, I will invite. I have two people in the middle here, and still, you were a student, so that was perfectly fine. But I'm also asking my high school students if they have any questions. So anyway, so please.
First, on environmentally harmful subsidies. As you rightly said, by the way, there is a high consensus on phasing it out, but this high consensus vanished always when we have to agree about concrete measures. That's fact of life, because I have seen in many documents already written we have to phase out high environmentally harmful subsidies. What I'm trying to do, and this is something on which we are pretty much succeeding, is that we are now working in the Commission that through the semester process, where we have the possibility to influence on the governance of member states, we are giving a kind of recommendation of member states should phase out environmentally harmful subsidies. There are also other recommendations which are connected with the taxes, but we use that I think could become one of the strongest tools which you can in practice use, that those words which we have in many documents would become a reality. So also which one to phase out. Of course, in the coal sector, this is more than obvious. In the agricultural sector, what I was trying to do was basically connecting as much as possible of the subsidies which go there with public good philosophy, so that the farmers could receive that money if they do some public good job. Because for me it's logical, if it's public money, you don't deliver public money for production as such, because with all the side effect consequences, because if you do it like that, then we have many who would like to have that kind of subsidy. So, but if you via that provide protection of biodiversity, if you via that provide protection of good quality water and so on, if you pay the farmer not to pollute water rather than first pay him to pollute the water and then punish him through that because he or is overshooting the nitrates directive, and then you have to punish the state and so on, that makes no sense for me. So we have really tried hard. Sincerely, I can tell you that I was, at the end of the process, a bit frustrated, because the proposal of the Commission was not bad at all. But when it passed the Council, when it passed the Parliament, that's not what I hoped for at the beginning. And we have still a bit too much of this hypocrisy, which means we all are in favor of greening when that suits us, but we don't want really when it hurts us to implement it in practice. But we should understand that, by the way, I'm farmer's son, so I absolutely know what farming is and how I hated it when I was young. No, I hated it from a very simple reason. I was addicted to sport. And of course, I was always on the field where it was nice weather. And I was always free when it was raining. So that addiction was then, of course, under severe threat. Anyway, I think it's. I think it would be really important that the farmers and the community there also understand that it's very much in their interest. Protecting the biodiversity, protecting the water, protecting some of the things which do not maybe come as a first instinct, but you need to look to those questions again, like we explained before with the fishery and fisheries, sustainable agriculture. It's also the same story. It's the same story. Either you work inside that, or you try to concentrate it more short-time interest. And for that concrete thing which you talked about in the cap, frankly, I don't know about it. On your question about, yes, the new proposals on which we will work will be connected to the household waste, so which is basically the municipal waste. and we will strengthen the standards there. So that's what you can expect. Currently we have 50% till 2020. You can expect some, I don't know, 70 till 2030. But currently we have few member states who are already over 60%. And we have some regions which are over 70%. We know that it's feasible, we know it's possible. But the problem of European Union, it's not countries who are over 60%, but countries who are close to zero. So we have 8 countries which landfill more than 85%. Still, yeah. And as you know, we are Commission and we have to take care for everybody. And finally, to Peter, one of the ways, again, worth mentioning, so how you best convey the message to the business sector. You have two types of approach. One, which they like more, it's of course the incentive approach, which means that via, for example, innovation funds or research funds, you basically channel those funds into direction that it's supporting the research type and development of their products which go in that direction. That's what we are doing. In the new Horizon 2020, it's a requirement that 60% of that money which will be used for the research and innovation should be connected to the climate change and greening of the society. So that's a pretty. So we are making tracking. Either we are committing what we are committing, but I remember very well that, for example, in transport, all the research was done for the purposes of greening the transport or greening the energy and so on. So we have never really done seriously through our money anything which would stimulate the direction which would go in different way. The second way of how you address that, it's of course through a bit more biting things, like if you move the taxes from labor to the resources. So if you tax more resources, that means that of course somebody has to accommodate that to their economic activity. If you remove environmentally harmful subsidies, it's the same. I think in the crisis times where majority has the budgetary problems, it makes all the sense to remove environmentally harmful subsidies because you hit two targets at the same time. So budgetary stability and on one hand, and on the other hand, you remove something which was from the very first instance wrong. Then, of course, there are various things which we do through setting out the regulation. So when you set out, we have enormous requests for the companies which have to fulfill, we have, for example, Industry Emissions Directive, which is for big installations clearly saying you will receive your ticket to work only if you fulfill this, and this, and this. And these requirements are, of course, strengthened from year to year. And many of them are complaining a lot that we are simply asking too much and pushing them on the limit of competitiveness. But I could continue and continue, because whatever we do in whatever policy, for example, even before the investment is done, we have environmental impact assessment. So you can't invest in something which will fundamentally cause damage to the environment, and so on. So it's really practically all the legislation which we adopt, and there are, if there is anything where people are complaining, it's that we have too much of it, not too little. We are doing exactly that, but step by step, with knowing and having more understanding, better knowledge, we try to strengthen those requirements, and sometimes we would need to go faster. That's the only thing where we could basically discuss.
Thank you very much. We have not very much time left, so I will ask the two remaining, and still, if there is one of the students from Östermalms Gymnasium, who wants to say something. So, very short.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Commissioner. My name is Jacob Granit from the Stockholm Environment Institute. My question is perhaps more political than technical. Many people argue that EU is a club, and I would argue personally a very successful club in many policy areas, not to least in the environment. We have a lot of collective action problems that we are now tackling together. At the same time, we have upcoming EU parliamentary elections, and for instance, also in this country, there's a lot of skepticism about where the EU is moving. There's a lot of debate about regions even splitting off, and which I think, in a sense, is of course jeopardizing our joint project, and it's a real concern, I would argue. So my question to you is, could we somehow utilize the environmental area of the success that we have actually achieved together over the past 40, 50 years or so to demonstrate that there is a huge value of working together? And could that be better enhanced? And in parallel also, could we utilize the vision that you paint so nicely between environment and economy as a new alternative, and that we can go ahead so that we create some sort of a vision for people here, which seems now to be slightly fading, and which I think is a huge concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One question was cancelled. Responses. We have one more there then. We take that opportunity still. Anyone in the back row? Come on. I have teenagers at home in high school and they are never quiet. I don't know what happened.
Something is wrong with you.
I know. That's true. They always like to challenge me. It must be the same for you, no?
Must be the same.
I know. We can,
I have two. They are never quiet.
Oh, you recognize it?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
We have a common vision there.
Yes, we have.
So please.
Hello, and thanks again for a very good conversation, which I think we can all find easy to agree with. My name is Magnus Benzi, also from the Stockholm Environment Institute. You gave environmental and economic reasons why we need change. But thinking especially long-term, strategically, I wonder is it helpful or dangerous to also talk about the security or the geopolitical reasons for change? And I'm thinking particularly of your metaphor with the football pitch, and with a bad referee, it's the most aggressive players that win.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I can actually say yesterday we had a seminar here in Stockholm on food security from a Swedish context, and a lot of discussions fell back on the fact that, well, we talk about food security from a European context, but we are also importing a lot, so the security issue is coming into many of these aspects as well. How vulnerable are we actually to changes also in the broader environment? So, last chance from you up there. You don't want to? Okay. They're passing.
Johan, I'll take the chance then.
You're okay. You look like a student, so it's okay.
Pernilla Beralt, European Commission in Stockholm. We are approaching the European elections, and the votes in Sweden will take place on the 25th of May. It'll be interesting to hear your perspective, Commissioner, on how the environment issues, according to you think will be played out in the debates in the different member states towards the EU election.
Okay, thank you. So that's great. I think they are all somehow, well, the last question is very specific as well, but please.
Yeah, the first one was very similar question, but a bit different angle. It was more, could we utilize environment better? Of course, the answer is yes. It's very, I can give you the most convincing argument is the life of each and every citizen of Sweden would be worse off without European Union in the area of environment. I can guarantee you that. 80% of all the legislation which is guiding your life has origins on European territory. 80%. And I'm pretty sure that in many cases we would not reach such standards as we are reaching if we would not work together. And so there are other things also when you talk about European Union which one has to take into consideration, but I will not start exploiting it because that would become a long story.
We have only 3 minutes left.
Yes. Magnus, we tend not to talk too much about potential conflicts because we somehow assume that we are so intelligent that this is our past, but the reality is that we know that this is not our past. Yes, I think you are right. Geopolitical questions, if we seriously consider those issues, should be part of the reason why we should avoid it. All the conflicts in the past were about resources. Land, oil, water, name it. So there were not all, but majority were the real reasons were connected with that. More, if you combine the story which I explained, then of course logical conclusion would be if you do not solve and start to solve the issues, then of course more competing demand for the same resources started. That means that more potential conflicts could emerge. And I think it is important to understand that if not properly addressed, I'm afraid that this kind of developments could lead also potentially to more conflicts. But as I said, I hope we are intelligent enough not to lead into that direction. Because when the conflicts are there, then you know that I'm coming from Slovenia. We've had a 10 days war, and during that war I promised to myself I will be a good guy till the end of my life, if something like that would not come closer again. And finally, the question which was also on EP elections, how environment will be present. I know one answer, that's not enough. I don't know how much it will be, but it would be really good if it would be present more than it was, because it makes sense. And you know, as majority of citizens don't really know what is public debt, deficit here, deficit up, deficit down, these austerity measures and others, but they all know what is water to swim in, of good quality, water to drink, air to breathe, biodiversity preservation, and so on and so on. So it's something which is easy, understandable, and also very much essence of our life. And if we don't care for the essence of our life in those election days, then missed opportunity.
And you see, this is a very representative group of the Swedish population. How many people in here think environment is important? So you see, it's a very clear majority. So it's going to be like that. This is, as I said, a representative group, no bias. So we have a 10-second final.
Oh,
yes, because it's.
Okay, I will try. My name is Samuel Jarek. I represent Climate Action, a grassroots organization in Sweden, trying to make politicians do politics based on science, really. And actually, what we need to be honest. I'm really happy about your speech. It's really straightforward and honest. And if we are honest, we have to admit that we are not even close to what we need to do in order to make keep below 2 degrees target. And what lies on the table now is 30% for 2030 is almost unnecessary. We could just as well skip doing it, because it's not even close to what we need to do. If you read modern climate science, like Kevin Anderson, and the two main tools that EU has at the moment is the ETS system that has collapsed almost, and the CDM projects that are not additional at the moment. The CDM and the CDM schemes are very, very cheap at the moment, so they don't work as well. So, given this, we're not even close to what we need to do, and the tools are so weak. How do you deal with your frustration in the Commission?
So, in 10 seconds, this is a question to bring with you.
Yes, we are close to the end of mandate. No, it's. You have to know, whatever job you have, I think it's you will be, and you are forced to compromises. And I'm a fierce defender of the things inside of the house. Outside of the house, I try to be loyal to the things which we adopt, because that's the only way how we can basically have worked the things in reality. But I think that's a fair approach. But in-house you have to fight. Yes, in-house you have to be what? Incredible. Yeah.
So thank you very much. A warm applause to Commissioner Potočnik. And we thank you in particular also for being very, very honest in your presentation and for providing really substantial answers to the many questions. I also would like to thank the EU office here in Stockholm for the collaboration we've had with them, and the Stockholm University and the Vice Chancellor, Assi Stödberg Widing, for the excellent collaboration as well on this seminar, and the audience. So thank you very much. Have a good afternoon. Climate change is coming this afternoon. It's going to be 7 degrees instead.